Okay, so we're going to be leading into the next session now. So the next session is all about, it's one of my favorite topics actually. It's about embracing employer branding and culture. So we have with us Lavinia Rajaram, who is the Asia Pacific head of communications for Expedia. So I'm sure we all know it. It's one of the world's full service online travel brands. Lavinia joined Expedia in June 2016, and she's responsible for brand identity, media relations, corporate communications, consumer and technology PR, regulatory and policy comms, crisis comms across the Asia Pacific, and she's also a member of the Global Communication Leadership Team. You have a lot on your plate, I can tell. In 2020, Lavinia expanded her existing capacity to lead two areas of Expedia's business: to lead Expedia's Singapore end-to-end marketing, orchestrating and executing all of Expedia Singapore's marketing campaigns, and public policy communications for Expedia Group across the region. So she's a seasoned communications practitioner with more than 18 years experience, with a strong background in tech, corporate, consumer, regulatory communications and brand reputation management, both in-house and in agency. She's come to Expedia after several years at Microsoft, Weber Shandwick and Shell Malaysia. In 2017, she was presented with Asia's Greatest CMO Award as part of Asia One's annual Pride of Asia series, and is currently serving as the communication representative on Asia's Travel Technology Industry Association, as well as Asia Internet Coalition. She's a passionate traveller and a lover of the arts, tech and wildlife. She grew up in KL in Malaysia, and she has been living in Singapore since 2011. So welcome, Lavinia.
Hi, good afternoon, Sydney and friends that have joined us virtually from around the region. Thank you for that big introduction, Zara, and it is my honor to be joining the team here. I was listening to the presentation prior to this, and it's really interesting to know the environment that we have been and have adapted so easily. It was a little bit of a struggle in the beginning, and then, virtual settings became a norm over time. I will have to apologize in advance if you hear the occasional dog barking in the background, but this, I think, it's an environment that we all have started to get used to. So in the next 30 minutes, I will walk you through some key components of employer branding and culture, and the importance of it in the current climate as we are facing today. Expedia Group has just concluded a refresh in terms of our employer branding vision and mission. And we've incorporated a lot of the learnings that we've taken in a COVID environment to ensure that we're engaging our employees at the highest touch points. So I think I'll start by saying everyone in talent acquisition today understands the importance of employer branding, but creating that effective employer branding communication strategy is something that many organizations still struggle to get right. And I think as a communicator, I've been involved in many iterations of building employer branding strategies, and we've seen the level of involvement of where leadership play a high role, and the importance of that in really advocating for a seat at the table and making your point across as early as possible. But I have to say there is no one way right to get an employer branding strategy perfected, but there are some best practices of which I will share with you today. Now, most employees want to do the right thing. They want their company to succeed, but even the best employees with the best intentions need to know where to go. So without direction, there's a lot of noise that eventually happens that can keep your employees and ultimately your company from getting ahead. As you know, Expedia Group is a global travel company. We have presence in more than 300 locations around the world. We have close to 20,000 employees. And so keeping that engagement level and connecting with them has been really critical for us in the last 12 months, more so when a lot of the leadership is based out of central locations like Singapore, Australia, London, and Seattle, which is our headquarters. So ensuring the engagement level in a virtual setting has been incredibly important for us. Now, I'll start with building your foundation. Your mission is your company's purpose. And I think we all have a sizzle statement that companies often use that is, proud and shiny, but how do we adapt that into the culture of the day-to-day engagement and experiences in terms of how we build that into our employees? And how we translate that and communicate that to our employees is also a reflection of how we communicate that to our customers externally. So it is why you do what you do, and that should stand the test of time, really building that strong mission and purpose. But that doesn't mean it has to be boring or basic. I think, like I said, communicators always get involved in the various iterations of it. It has to be short and simple. It has to be clear and concise. It has to be something that represents your industry, it represents your brand, but more so it has to be something that employees feel really proud about advocating for. As you develop your mission statement, consider what makes your company unique. Is it the quality of your product or service? Is it the way you communicate to your customers? Is it the fairness? There's also a lot of diversity that has now become a key component in the way we build our culture today. And how do we then also involve the communities that we have presence in? And given that if you're a global company, you need to keep all of that in mind. When you incorporate these elements into your mission statement, it says that in every way that you approach the market, this is where your organization places value. And I can share some key examples of being a global company. And I run the Asia Pacific division for Expedia. We're so diverse in the Asian markets. Something that we practice in the Japanese environment may not be applicable to the way we connect with our employees in Korea or in Taiwan or in China for that matter. And so really having a strong lens of diversity and inclusion at every part of building that strategy journey is extremely critical. Employees will always do what they think is best according to what they think leaders want. And I think this is where do as you say approach comes into play. But if you tell them what you want, it focuses really on the behavior as intended. So vision and mission statements are often confused by employees. While the mission statement is broad and lofty, the vision statement narrows it down in terms of why we exist and why are we doing this today. So what's the strategic direction? What do you want to accomplish out of it? What are the goals you're looking to drive? Where do you want to be in the future? And by when do you want to achieve that? So the vision statement is how to accomplish the mission. It should be measurable. Now, once you've established the two foundations of what you want to strive to be as a business, it's time to then articulate the values. And values could come in many guiding principles component that we practice today. Much like your vision supports your mission, the cultural values that help you achieve your vision should be the example of what employees need to know. For example, a good value statement might say, it's okay to disagree in environments where you feel stressed about. It is not okay to be disagreeable. And this particular type of value tells employees that you want and need their opinion, but that you also want them to be respectful. And again, in a global environment that we are experiencing today, we've seen a lot of this diversity come into play in markets where cultures have always suppressed employees from speaking up to leadership. We've seen environments where hierarchy plays a high value for the Asian community. And so we've had to do a lot of work to sort of bring down and break that barrier and allow for that easy access between employees and leadership. And this is very much something that we've seen and experienced. So concrete cultural values define the behavioral expectations. They explain how the company expects the individual employee to work. So really setting that direction in terms of how we want to incorporate this in the day-to-day elements of what we do internally. And eventually that advocates for how we stand externally to our customers. So with your company's values as your compass, so use that as your central direction, employees will naturally work towards a company mission and vision. Over time, they'll develop healthy and productive methodologies for achieving their individual goals as well. So this is, the three core components: your mission, vision, and values should eventually be then translated into employee performance reviews in terms of how are they demonstrating this in their quarterly reviews, or how are they bringing that to life in some of the strategic goals that they have developed for themselves. Now, the important component, once you've established the three foundations, is bringing in the employee into the wider communication of this. So really evangelizing your concept, ensuring that you have solicited, sufficient feedback from employees. And this can be done through various polls. And we've seen us, adopt many platforms to engage our employees. The communication platforms in Expedia, we use Slack. Slack allows us to engage our employees on a day-to-day basis. We've seen a lot more employees use Slack than they have used email, so we've reduced the consumption of emails, but Slack allows for constant engagement and open conversation between leaders and employees. So when you've established the foundations of a brand in your company, it is now time to unlock that important phase of this journey, which is communicating it to employees and bringing them on board as you externalize and evangelize your values. Have you ever seen a marching band perform? So I'm going to use a little bit of an example here. I love using food examples, but I'm going to take a different approach given that this also involves larger communities. So you may be a small business, a startup, or a large organization of more than 20,000 people. And a marching band is a good example for us to sort of look at how this then gets translated. The band often looks to the drum major as the top waving the baton. And this helps the band to see what direction they should be moving so that they can create the right formation of the field. So your mission, vision, and values are the batons for your company. As long as employees can see the baton, they can march in the same direction and organize the way you have intended. So having that strong leaders that then help translate and stir the ship in the right direction is extremely critical, and getting them on board at the right and at the very beginning is also critical. If a company does not align itself with its mission, some employees will work towards one thing while others will work towards the other. So there's a lot of misalignments that could happen along the way. Senior leaders are your keepers of this baton. They must be accountable for making sure employees work continuous to support the mission and vision day after day. One example I could share with you at Expedia is we have created a KPI for the next 3 years to ensure we strike a balance between a diverse leadership team from the top all the way to different levels at the bottom. What we want to see is more representation of a diverse background, more representation with male and female leaders to ensure that we get a collective voice when decisions are made. So today we are looking at 60% of female leadership at the top. We're almost close to meeting that goal with 58%, but these represent so very important to have that single voice right at the top. So holding your leaders accountable is extremely critical. So the occasional town halls that you organize are a great example and a great way for you to communicate this back to your leaders. Now I'll sort of take you through a value chain of what we have created at Expedia. We practice a test and learn culture where we look at and test and learn is a very technology term that's used, and we're partly a tech company. But we do this at every level of the business, where we try to implement a new process, we test it, we take the learnings from it, and if it hasn't worked or it hasn't proven results, we move away from it. Or we sort of enhance that, we're starting to see positive reaction, we sort of grow from it. So this value chain of 8 steps has proven to be extremely effective for us, and it's something that I thought will be valuable for the community that I'm speaking with. So once you have rolled out your new mission and purpose and values, how can you then keep that front and center at the core of your operating model today? And here are a few examples that I'm going to take you through. The first step is to do a pulse check. So ask questions at the very beginning. If you're building a new mission, vision statements, involve your employees in that journey, conduct continuous pulse check to ensure that you've ultimately arrived at the right, the right outcome that you're looking to achieve. For example, include questions like, do you know what the company's mission is? Do you know how you want to contribute towards the company's vision? Or, if you find that your employees' answers are inconsistent or inaccurate, you need to help them better understand how to articulate them. The second process is really the decision making. So when a company outlines its mission, everything and everyone begins to head in the same direction. It becomes easier to spot what's working and what isn't. So this is where the test and learn methodology comes into play. For example, say a new program is having issues, ask, is this something we need to reach our mission? And if it's not aligned to our mission or vision, then it needs to be something that needs to be deprioritized, and make that decision clear. I would say in the last 12 months, with managing the COVID crisis, we've had to make some very, very critical decisions to deprioritize big projects that we had planned for the next 3 to 5 years. What we had to prioritize, and it is core to our business, was ensuring that our customers were really taken care of in this troubled climate. As you know, we're a travel and tourism company. So at the start of the pandemic, when it first hit the Asian markets, it was really critical to ensure that our customers or our travelers were getting home safely as borders were getting shut. So we worked closely with government organizations to ensure that, our number one assets were being taken care of, which is our employees. And secondly, it was our customers that we had to ensure that was cared for. We also implemented a process where projects that were being deprioritized, the workload that was needed in other components or areas of the business was then spread out evenly. An example I would share was when we hit the peak of the crisis in April last year, we were receiving at least 10,000 to 11,000 calls in our call center at any one point. People wanting to cancel their travel, get their refunds. And so we really had to ensure that our employees came on board to also play the role of customer service, because our service centers were also being shut down in markets where borders were being closed and where markets were going into lockdown. And so we got our employees quickly trained to use customer service tools, and we gave them the responsibility of ensuring they took care of the core of our business, which is our customers. So really the decision-making process has to be really crystallized at the start. If it doesn't work, quickly move on to the next best options. The third component is town halls. Now, in an ideal, healthy world, we used to have face-to-face town halls where employees then had the opportunity to ask open, transparent questions. We also used a lot of tools, like I mentioned earlier, Slack. We also use Slido to ask questions. We've kept the practice to be, if employees had the choice of asking anonymous questions, of course, we encourage employees to be transparent in asking their questions by stating their name. But oftentimes we also want to respect that space because it can have a lot of cultural impact. So town halls is something we do every month. It's also an opportunity for employees to get a view of what's happening in the business, how we're performing, but at the same time for leaders to have access to how employees are feeling. And so this is done in every division of the company, and everyone is invited. So you can choose to attend a town hall outside of your division. It's more for the learning, but also the access to some of these leaders that we sometimes don't have on a day-to-day basis. Now, the fourth element is individual goals. And I talked about how it is so critical for us to implement mission and vision practices in performance review. Today, we have prioritized that every employee in Expedia Group needs to have a diversity goal in their quarterly reviews. And this could translate, for instance, in my capacity as a communicator, I need to ensure how do I weave in diversity aspect in the way I communicate to the media, the way I engage my team, in my hiring process, in the way I build that culture for my team internally and externally. So diversity is one of the key goals that we have implemented. So managers should really meet employees where they are and regularly. And by analyzing what the employee does and how he or she keeps to achieve the company's mission and vision, managers can make that more relevant to the individual. So really communicating clearly and ensuring that everyone understands the Bible of the organization. Employees who clearly understand their piece of the pie often find more meaning in their work and stay more engaged. And we've seen this especially in a COVID environment where we've all had to work virtually and maintain that level of engagement. The fifth component, a very important one, is the regular direct report check-ins. So really doing that, weekly one-on-ones or bi-weekly one-on-ones. But the check-ins allow you to understand how your teammates or your employees are performing, where the struggles are, where the barriers are, and more importantly, the role you play as a manager to unlock those barriers. And again, in a COVID environment, sometimes some of these barriers are beyond the work environment. Sometimes it could be the struggle of our home environment. It could be employees, living in an environment where they are sharing, internet access at home and they need to be in the office. And so oftentimes that could impact their level of contribution and motivation as well. So HR, we've worked closely with our HR business partners to ensure that we speak to our employees regularly. We've also set up, third-party, partnerships with counselors so that employees have that access to speak to someone third-party. But more importantly, that health pulse is extremely critical in the current environment. And then giving the option to the employees to choose, how they want to create that environment for at home, or if they need to be in the office, we then give them the option to do that. The sixth area is often something that has been really cringy for certain leaders who have not had a big background in being people managers. So the difficult conversations that we have. When difficult conversations occur, we often refer back to our company mission and vision. So this is why we have a very strong statement. It really is the foundation of why we exist. For example, in a service industry like Expedia Group, we may say our mission revolves around the quality and the people trust us about it. How we demonstrate ourselves is how customers will also learn about us. So this week, there were several instances of poor quality experiences being put out there. We've seen things that translate from the US that could impact the APAC markets, things that happen in UK, government announcements that are being made that could also impact, the morale of our employees. So not only does this not meet our standard, but you have to understand the message this sends out to our customers. So how do we then, as communicators, be that mediator and step in as quickly as possible to mitigate such situations and ensure we advocate for positive intention at every step of that journey? Now, the seventh step we found has been proven to be really successful in helping bring down the barriers between employees and senior leaders. So implementing skip level meetings. And this allows you to have open conversations with your senior leaders. So this is your manager's manager. It also helps you express interest in career growth within the organization. But these conversations need to be very open and transparent. And lastly, to bring all of that together, the rewards is something that helps with your talent retention. So keep employees aware of how they are doing and reward them for the good work. For example, if a client retention is extremely critical to your business, it might mean rewarding an employee who did everything they could in a difficult climate like today to keep that client happy. And more importantly, ensure rewards are linked and tied back to your mission and vision. Because ultimately, a healthy employee base creates a healthy environment at work, and that translates to being a positive brand to the external audience. So that wraps up, some of the key examples that we have now brought on board in Expedia Group. I would have to say the last 12 months, Expedia Group has existed for 25 years, but the work that we did in the last 12 months was a true testament in the commitment we've seen our employees to be part of this very challenging journey. And everyone has played a part in helping us get over the line. I think the next 12 months will prove to be critical for us as an organization as we contribute towards the recovery of travel. And hopefully, all of you would be able to then, experience that travel that all of us are so deprived of today. So that wraps up my presentation for this morning.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Lavinia. I do have some questions. I'm quite interested in finding out from a employer brand perspective, or from a brand perspective, how do you go about aligning employee experience with customer experience and digital experience?
We use several platforms, for external platforms, and these are some of the social platforms that we are commonly using, like LinkedIn or Instagram. We've also adapted new technologies like TikTok. What we need to understand is really understanding where your audience is and where your customer segments are, and ensuring that you communicate to them in those various segments that you have identified. And being a global company, it's very difficult for us to adapt a single template that can be rolled out globally, which is why having that mission and vision keeps us at the core of everything that we do. How we execute it locally has to be very locally relevant in markets. So the way we engage with our employees in Malaysia and our customers in Malaysia are extremely different in the way we do that, for instance, in Spain or Mexico, because the platforms are different. The reaction we get from our customer base is also very different. The last 1 year, we've seen a lot of our employees really evolve. I think the impact of COVID has also really hit us as a company. We've had to do various headcount reduction exercises as part of this. And so it's been a real trial and difficult time. And more so when employees are working virtually, we often do not have access to who has been infected. We don't know who is in the organization or who is not. And that can be extremely challenging. So what we've done is we have created a central, platforms, communication platforms internally for our employees, but they have also access to some of the challenges our customers are facing externally. And this is built out in a very hyper local, experience. Like I said, the way we engage our employees and customers in the Asian markets are very differing from a market-to-market perspective. So start with understanding your audience, then followed by identifying the platforms that you need to speak to them internally and externally, and then creating that localized version of that core mission and vision that you have built and set up to succeed.
Now, my cavoodle's barking in the background. You can predict it every single time. When you're talking about things like having layoffs as have been necessary in a lot of cases through the pandemic, and particularly in your industry as well, how are you maintaining that level of engagement and morale within Expedia through the Asia Pacific region?
So that's a really good question. I think the town halls, the frequent town halls has allowed us to create that touch points with our employees. What we've also done is conduct, we started off with weekly pulse checks, and that sort of evolved to monthly and then quarterly. Now the pulse checks allows us to solicit feedback from our employees, and some of these are done anonymously, but it gives us a sense of how employees are feeling and what they want and what they want to hear from us. And oftentimes it's not the rewards that come with it, but they want leaders that they can trust to take us through this challenging journey and get us out of this crisis when the time is right. And so we've had a CEO come on board right at the start of the crisis last year in February, and he has played an instrumental role in being really involved at every level of the business and in any market around the world. So he has spent time with us, and he has given his time, and he's made that very clear that he will spend the first 30, 60 days of his role really engaging with employees globally. Internally, we have a platform implemented called Slack. Now, Slack allows us to engage with our leaders at any one point. So it's a communication platform. There are no rules of engagement. I think you just got to keep those communications clean and sanitized. But it also has given us that opportunity to engage leaders and ask the questions that we want. So that open and transparent culture has started to weave into our, our daily mantra and belief. And we've seen employees really open up and those doors really come down. We struggle a little bit in the Asian environment. As I mentioned, some examples I could give you in a Japanese context where hierarchy is so important. We struggle to get employees to speak up because they often shy away from speaking to senior leaders. But that's just a general diverse practice in a Japanese environment. So all of these components had to be shared with our senior leaders. Of course, being a US-based company, they needed to understand what that culture was in Asia and why such reaction was experienced. In the last 12 months, we also have set up a diversity council within the organization. We hired a diversity leader in the US and also in key markets around the world. And the role they play is really ensuring that these feedback is sort of funneled upwards so that our senior leaders are aware and they know that the struggles that employees are facing on a day-to-day basis. Again, COVID has thrown a huge spanner in the works for us, but it has also opened up our eyes to some of the challenges that employees face outside of the work environment that we may not have been visible to. For instance, I live in an apartment in Singapore. Sometimes I don't get, good Wi-Fi connection, or I have my puppy barking in the background, but this is the environment that we live in. I've seen conference calls where children are screaming in the background, but that brings the uniqueness of the life that we lead today and how much we have to juggle. And that, with that, openness that we have, then allows us to think about, look, ultimately we're all humans, we're trying to get our job done, but it allows us to have that access to every information that we need, and also all leaders that we want access to.
I have another question for you with regards to employer brand and employer experience, and we know how important line managers are. So what are you doing with line managers and people leaders in terms of having them understand what their role is in delivering the right sort of employee experience and delivering on that employer value proposition that you would have from Expedia?
Absolutely. So there are two or three things that we've implemented, not just in the last 12 months, but in the last few years that we've started to now practice. One is we do a peer-to-peer coaching, for employees. We also have the mentor-mentee programs that we have opened up, but we've now developed some internal training sessions where we've invited senior leaders or employees at every level to then present. We do lunch brown bag sessions. We want to give the exposure to employees to then have a platform to present their skill sets and background. So for managers to sort of get through this journey and truly understand some of the struggles that their employees are facing, we've had to bring in some experts at the beginning to sort of, really address some of the underlying problems that we did not face, prior to COVID and being that virtual background. I think there were times when managers were so used to seeing their team in the office, so that level of trust was always there. But in a virtual setting, it is very difficult to then establish that confidence and trust that you have in your team in getting the job done. What we've implemented are a few things, and this was all part of ensuring that we kept our employee morale high. But more importantly, it was also part of our talent retention program. The first thing we introduced at the start of the COVID crisis was the option for employees, especially working parents or working employees that have children. We gave them the 4-week work option so that you can take 1 day of your week off to manage your household. The second thing that we also did was to ensure that employees had all the equipment and assets to work productively at home. So if you did not, you could request for IT equipment to be set up at your home. Our offices were not being used, so we were able to go in and you can grab your office chair if you think that makes a difference for you to work at home. We looked at all those areas of the well-being component because ultimately if your employee base is healthy, they then become a little bit more productive. But for line managers, again, that really critical component in the current climate was all about diversity. And if you have a manager that is not part of your region or doesn't understand the culture that you live in, that actually creates a little bit of a roadblock in the conversations that you have. So establishing that diversity council that also played a role and addressed some of these pain points was quite critical. Lastly, we conduct 360 feedback every quarter. So we always ask employees to solicit feedback from at least 10 or 15 people in their organization, including feedback on managers. So we do manager feedback that then goes up to the senior leaders. And so managers then use those results as a benchmark of how they are performing as a manager, because then it's reflected on their performance as well. So the 360 feedback has played a big role in helping us shape really good, positive leaders, but leaders who are supportive of the current climate and the challenges that we are facing today.
I was actually going to ask you how you're capturing employee voice, and you just led right into that one. So that was quite good. We've only got a couple of minutes left. So I was actually going to ask you a question. I've heard there's an interesting piece of work that's done out of, I think it's Denmark, on organizational network analysis. And they've worked out that 3% of your employees have the potential to reach 80% of the rest of the organisation in terms of influencing them. So there are really 3% of people in your organisation who have got that the level of influence. They're not necessarily leaders. They're the ones that people turn to for energy, that sort of thing. Do you have any sort of system like that at Expedia, where you're looking to who those real influencers are beyond the line managers and beyond the people who have got leader in their title?
Yeah, for sure. What we have set up are, office committees in every location that we have presence in. The office committee comprises of a social committee, a sports committee, and what they do is they organize events to sort of rally employee involvement. CSR, corporate responsibility was also one of it. When we hit the COVID environment, these committees continue to operate, and they've had to be really creative in the way they pivoted from, what we used to do engagements in the office and have happy hours once a week. We had to do that virtually. So they did come together, and this is in addition to their existing jobs. Some of these committee members are all on volunteer basis. But we sort of cherry-picked people who really had a strong voice, but also a strong influence in the organization. And so they organized events on a monthly basis and a weekly basis to sort of bring people together virtually. So we'll do virtual happy hours. We will do pub quiz sessions. We also celebrated monthly birthdays, monthly anniversaries. So the engagement was there and constant. In some markets, we would organize food drop-offs to our employees once a month, because we used to have office breakfast in the office. So we sort of had to think creatively, how do we sustain the engagement at a low-cost way, because we were also trying to save company money, but also using some of these internal advocates to create that frequent engagement. So in the larger markets, it's a little bit more complex, where you may have 1,000 employee base. But again, in today's environment, the adoption of technology tools to be able to do this and scale it so quickly. But today we're using Zoom. We're able to connect, to a wider audience. Has been extremely, extremely interesting the way we've adapted it. So those, internal advocates that we have identified organize these events on a monthly, sometimes weekly basis. And their role is really tasked at keeping the engagement high, but also ensuring that we take our employees through this journey and we come out of it feeling really contributed to the company.
Thank you. That's perfect segue. We're down to the 48-second mark, which is just, I've just got to keep an eye on that clock, otherwise we just get cut off totally.
Thank you.
So thank you so very much. I really found that valuable, listening to you and seeing how you actually do it across such a large organisation with so many employees and bringing it all together. I really like the way you've done your value chain and how you apply it. It makes so much sense. As someone who works in employer branding, I really think that that's a valuable tool to use and to apply. So thank you for sharing. with us. It's fantastic and joining us from Singapore. So we're about to go to an afternoon break and we'll see everyone after that. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Whew, done.
Great job. Thank you. I hope you have a good day. You're keeping safe in Sydney.
Oh, I'm in Melbourne, so we're all okay at the moment. So
I miss Australia. I'm actually Australian PR, so I used to travel back and forth between Singapore and Australia, and I miss it so much. The last 1 year, I think my last flight was 3rd of Feb last year, and that was coming back from Melbourne.
Yeah. Mine was last February, and I'm jumping on a flight on Sunday to go to Sydney. I'm actually running an in-person workshop on Wednesday morning, but I've got a governance conference Monday, Tuesday. So I'm a bit anxious, but hey, it is what it is. So yeah, looking forward to the day that we can actually do it safely again.
And give a hug to another human. That's just human touch and human value is just so, it's the sameness for us, right? It's the same, you wake up, the same view outside your window, that same path you run, and that sameness is starting to affect a lot of us, I think.
Yeah, very true, very true. I love Singapore, so one day I will come and visit and say hello.
Yes, let's stay in touch. Thank you, Zora. And
thank you.
Have a good day.